Let's start this deep dive right where the action is. So picture this. You're at a plant nursery in November 2025. You're browsing the seasonal clearance deals, looking for a bargain, and then you see it standing out from all the others. Something, truly dramatic. It's the Staghorn Fern, the Platycerium species.
It's the perfect setup, isn't it? You find this exotic, almost high-status plant, maybe even at a discount, and that combination, it usually triggers an immediate impulse buy, especially for someone who's a dedicated hobbyist. But our mission today is to explore what happens after that moment. We're doing a deep dive, not on the thrill of getting something new, but on the real discipline of restraint.
Exactly. Our source material for this is a fascinatingly short entry. It's called Notes on Gardening, Part 721, and it's from qianmeng.org. The author, Ang, just describes himself as an old software plumber.
721 parts? Just let that sink in for a second. This is not a casual learner. This is someone who is, deeply dedicated to documenting their process. And yet he walked away. He walked away from a plant he clearly found interesting. So we're going to unpack his very specific, almost algorithmic reasons for saying no.
Because the lesson here is pretty universal, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're learning to code, trying a complex recipe, or starting a new hobby, sometimes the most advanced move you can make is just recognizing your own limits and deciding, you know what, I'll wait. Yes. Okay, let's unpack this exotic challenge, the Staghorn Ferns. These aren't the kind of plants that just sit in a pot. They look like these giant green shields mounted on a wall. They're truly architectural. And Ang found this one at a nursery that actually specializes in them, which means it was probably a top-quality specimen.
The temptation must have been huge. But what's so interesting is how he immediately recognized the barriers. He flags two things right away that make this a tough sell for a beginner. The first one is simple. He calls it exotic, and consequently rather expensive. That's just a pure financial risk assessment right there.
Yeah, and the second point is what really drives the difficulty home. It's all about the plant's unique anatomy. The Staghorn Fern is an epiphyte, right? So it naturally grows on trees, not in soil. And that leads to what he calls a unique vertically mounted growth habit.
And that one detail, that vertical requirement, it completely changes the game. You don't just put it in a bright window. You have to actively mount it, usually on a piece of wood or something, and then hang it on a wall.
So it's not just plant care anymore.
Exactly. It shifts from simple plant care to complex home decor and even structural planning. The plant itself is demanding a permanent, specific piece of real estate in your house.
Which means it's not just a skill test, it's a commitment test.
Yeah.
You have to be ready to integrate this massive piece of living art into your space.
Absolutely. And as we'll see, Ang treated this potential purchase exactly like he might approach a new project at work. Like implementing some high-risk, expensive piece of software. He ran it through a ruthless 3-part checklist, and it failed.
So let's really analyze his decision to wait. This is the core of the whole thing. He calls himself a beginner gardener, at least in the context of this specific plant, but his analysis is anything but amateur. He's assessing his situation based on current performance, not what he hopes to achieve.
The first barrier is just straightforward risk mitigation. Expense versus confidence. He explicitly notes the high cost. And then he couples that with his low confidence for this type of plant. It's a classic cost of failure calculation. Why spend top dollar on something that has a high chance of failing?
Right. If we put on that old software plumber hat, the analogy is so clear. You don't buy the most complex proprietary news server when you're still having trouble with your basic network. The risk is just too high.
Precisely. And the second barrier is where his technical background really, really shines through. He calls it microclimate management. He admits he's getting mixed results when he tries to acclimate new plants to the different microclimates across his gardening areas.
Okay, let's pause right there. Because for someone who doesn't track their home environment like a science lab, what exactly is a microclimate inside a house? And why are mixed results such a damning piece of evidence for him?
That's an excellent question. So when we talk about microclimates, we mean these subtle, tiny variations in temperature, humidity, and airflow that can exist just a few feet apart. Like the spot near a heating vent, or a shelf that's 10 feet from the humidifier, or a windowsill that gets an extra hour of sun. And tropical plants, especially ferns, are super sensitive to these little differences. Acclimation is the process of getting the plant to survive the shock of moving from a perfect nursery to your, slightly chaotic home environment.
So if Ang is getting mixed results, that means his whole system, his home, his routines, it's unstable. Some plants make it, some don't. It's an intermittent bug.
Exactly. And in software, intermittent bugs are the absolute hardest to solve. You don't know if the problem is the code, the infrastructure, or just the timing. And introducing an expensive, high maintenance piece of, well, biological hardware like the Staghorn Fern into that unstable system, it would just make debugging a nightmare. He knows he needs to stabilize his variables first.
He's choosing system stability over deploying a new feature. That is pure software architecture thinking.
It is. He's realizing that success in a hobby like gardening isn't about collecting the most plants. It's about getting consistent, reproducible results. And he's not there yet, so he held off.
And then there's the third barrier, which is just a purely physical one that we touched on, logistical placement, that vertical growth habit. He flat out says he hasn't figured out a suitable place for it in the house.
And that's the hardware constraint, right? If you can't deploy the hardware, you can't run the program. It shows this ruthless honesty about his own space. It's easy to buy a small fern and kind of squeeze it onto a shelf, but you can't really do that with a giant wall-mounted staghorn fern if you don't have the wall space, the right mount, or the correct light all ready to go.
So the big picture is crystal clear. The decision to wait is a very conscious, structured strategy. He's basically saying, I'll wait until my existing, less complicated ferns are thriving, and I'm confident I can manage these tricky microclimates.
It's the highest form of learning discipline, I think, prioritizing mastery of the fundamentals over just acquiring the next spectacular thing. He won't buy the complex, expensive toy till he's proven he can handle the simpler versions.
To really get the power of this single act of restraint, we have to zoom out and look at the huge scope of Eng's learning process. I mean, we keep saying it, Notes on Gardening, part 721. That implies hundreds of entries, consistent documentation on just one hobby.
And that level of dedication isn't isolated. You look at his site, and Eng is a polymath. He's a knowledge machine. And he manages all this information by compartmentalizing and rigorously documenting everything. This is where the old software plumber identity really matters. He's all about maintenance, stability, and tracking.
You can just see it in the sheer variety of subjects he's tracking and all this detail on his sidebar. It's not just tech, it's biology, home life, creative stuff.
Exactly. I mean, look at the software side. He's tracking open source projects, and he's documenting these really niche, specialized programming languages. Elixir, Erlang, Go, Rust. Those aren't languages you just dabble in. They require deep, focused technical knowledge.
And then the hobbies at home are tracked with that same scientific rigor. It's not just notes on fish keeping. He has dedicated logs for betta spawn logs and mizzle fishes set logs.
Yeah, think about that. To document a fish spawn successfully, you need highly controlled environments, precise timing, temperature logs, water chemistry analysis. You're watching parental behavior. He's applying the same systematic, high-detail tracking you'd need for programming in Rust to, a fish reproducing in his living room.
Which makes his decision about the staghorn fern even more profound, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is someone who generates, I think it was 40 posts of detailed content in a single month across all these fields, a relentless pursuit of knowledge. And he still stopped himself cold for purely practical reasons.
I think what stands out is the contrast between the ease of digital knowledge gathering and the friction of mastering a physical environment. Aang can read 1,000 articles on Elixir or even on the staghorn fern, put that in his notes, but he can't speed up the physics and biology of getting a real plant to acclimate in his home when his own data, his mixed results, proves the system is volatile.
So knowledge acquisition is his superpower, but logistical and environmental mastery is his current bottleneck. The staghorn fern isn't just another piece of information to file away. It's a high-stakes practical exam of his current setup. And he chose not to take the exam until he was better prepared.
He's self-aware enough to know that adding a complex new variable to an equation that's already giving you mixed results is just, it's poor resource management. He deferred the financial risk and, I think, the emotional risk of watching it fail.
So we circle back one last time to that staghorn fern, this symbol of the desirable, complex project. The decision not to buy it was built on 3 pillars. The high cost versus his beginner confidence, the lack of consistent microclimate mastery, and that unresolved puzzle of where to even put the thing.
And for you, the listener, this whole story is a powerful lesson in capacity planning. Whether you're thinking about a new coding language, a new investment strategy, or a really complicated hobby, Eng's process is a blueprint. Be rigorous. Recognize your current capacity, your own mixed results, and your physical constraints, your no place to put it, before you commit to something expensive and high maintenance.
It's the difference between being a perpetual beginner who just keeps buying new, shiny equipment and the disciplined learner who actually masters the tools and the environment they already have.
Yeah. Given Ang's detailed tracking across so many fields, from programming to fish spawning, his act of just waiting is probably the most insightful learning note he posted that entire month.
And that leads us to the final thought we want to leave you with. Given this methodology where knowledge seems limitless but physical logistics are very finite, what percentage of your own learning should be dedicated to restraint, to fortifying and establishing the skills you already have, versus that constant pursuit of something new, exotic, and shiny?
Think about the most exciting, complex, new thing you're tempted to dive into right now. What proof of concept, what stable result in your current projects are you waiting to achieve before you finally commit to that next high stakes level? It's not about what you can acquire, it's about what you are truly prepared to master.